What's good, man?
What's good with you?
Yeah, a lot of activity, mentally, emotionally.
I want to hear about all of it.
Yeah, interesting morning, right? So, had plans to get here at a certain time, didn't work out. 405 was a parking lot. It's frustrating off the top. And then after a while, I'm like, what's going on? So I look it up. And apparently, it's a fatal car crash. Father, son, they just got back from a trip from Hawaii. Going back home from, I think, John Wayne or something. And so that kind of right-sized everything a little bit. Yeah, I'm over here. I don't even think it was the traffic so much. It was just, I had nowhere to go. So sitting with everything was like, okay, can't run from anything. And then, knowing why the traffic happened was like, okay, take a breath, zoom out a little bit. So yeah, I'm coming in with a little bit of existential energy. I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's what it is today. Yeah, and so like 39 to 40 for me, hardest year of my life. Multiple fronts, and I think this might be the first time I've seen it in this way of I have multiple startups in my life that I'm trying to build, both work and personal. And I think there's too many plants in the garden. The cliche saying, I think you can have it all, but not all at once. And so I think that started to kind of swell up in me, like, man, I'm attempting to like rebuild a marriage. I'm attempting to shift my whole professional life, going back to school. I'm attempting to raise 2 beautiful kids. I'm attempting to support my wife's personal and professional interests. I'm attempting to support my parents as they age. It's like, man. And then there's me, like my own stuff, health, mental, all that stuff. So there was no like lightning bolt, like here's what you should do. It was just like, just look at it, sit with it. I know it's very vague and open-ended, but
It's not. First of all, let me tell you, it's okay to not be okay.
yeah,
That's not a cliche.
yeah,
I don't think it's a cliche anymore.
yeah.
I want to hear you say things are not okay.
Yeah, things are not okay.
That's okay.
Yeah,
That's okay. That's okay.
yeah. And in some of it too, like the personal stuff. I was thinking about this as I got closer to getting here. Because I'm in transition professionally in a lot of ways. Like I didn't necessarily have anything to fall back on or double down on to, I don't know what the word is, numb or not look at my personal issues.
It just brings them closer to the surface.
Bring it close to the surface, and maybe it could, like forces me to deal with it more often, more directly, but like I miss being good at something professionally.
Yeah.
And, the combination of, relationship challenges, like, I think is more clear to me that, like, how important the relationship was to me. And that I didn't have anything else to really, like, double down on.
Yeah.
So,
Would that have changed the reality
no.
of the fact that?
But I think my point was, like, I think unconsciously I'm looking for something.
Do you know what I mean, though?
Yeah.
If there was something else, would it have changed the reality that this other plant in your garden was not being watered.
No, the reality would have stayed the reality.
In fact, what we have now is a situation where you have many plants
Yeah.
and a very limited amount of water.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it points to also, I didn't have that language for about a year. And I think it's like helping me just like, okay, that's why I've been, whether chaotic or frantic or shut down. Like, I think that helps me understand a little bit better. It doesn't necessarily change reality, but it's just, it kind of helps me look at the chaotic energy I've had to deal with.
So many thoughts on everything that you've said.
Yeah.
I think it's all pretty real. I think one of the biggest bombs in my life was the bomb that I needed to rebuild my marriage.
Yeah.
And that shed a lot of light on a lot of things I was doing wrong. And just like you said, not having a fallback, it just made it all that more real as to how much that marriage was failing and what my part in that was.
Yeah.
And for so long, I tried to cling to something else.
Yeah.
That I thought could offset it, but it didn't.
Yeah.
And so you said that it's been a long time since you were good at something professionally.
Yeah.
I say that more and more I feel like I'm not really good at anything.
Yeah.
Like, I'm good at far less than I think I am. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's my language now.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, that's okay. I thought I was a really great husband. I wasn't. Thought I was a really great father. I wasn't. I thought I was a really great business owner. I wasn't. Thought I was a really great CEO. I wasn't. And not that that realization didn't allow me to grow a lot.
Sure.
But I might still not be the best
Yeah.
at any of those things, or even really marginally good. I don't know. There's no unified, centralized manual on how to do all this.
Right.
Where let me just go back to,
Yeah.
So I'll just repeat what I said in the beginning. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay for the situation to not be okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know how this relates. Maybe it's completely off topic, but you can help me connect the dots. But there's been like, even like during, I was downstairs at the gym, just kind of moving a little bit. And then also on Saturday, I was getting Phoenix, my son, a haircut at home. And despite like all of the thoughts and emotions over the past year, there's been these moments when I feel like I'm done. Not in a bad way, but I'm done with like the self-doubt and like the questions. And I'm just wondering, like, because I've felt something similar in the past without such like storms. And I'm wondering if it's like, if I'm just kind of, slowly but surely kind of getting connected back to God in some way. Of like, this is still reality on this side of heaven or the divine or whatever, but like, right now, here. That difference between, like pain and suffering, like there's going to be pain, but like, am I causing the suffering? Like, or am I like feeding some of this stuff? Because there are moments like, man, nothing has really changed, but like, I'm done with that. I'm done with that. Like,
the
being
time
so hard on myself, or the self-doubt, or
Yeah,
like
yeah.
eating myself alive doesn't even change the reality. But those are interesting moments when I can notice, like, yeah, I'm done with that extra pain or extra suffering that I'm causing. I'm just here. So it's still fine.
I think a real pivotal moment in any person's life, regardless of background, faith, is when they realize that pain and suffering are an inevitability, that they almost have to happen to force us to grow on some level. And now what do you do with that? What do you do with that pain and that suffering? How do you use it to drive you? How do you use it to give back? I think some of the most effective people in history were dealing with a ton of pain and suffering at the climax of their effectiveness.
Sure.
And it's really hard to think of one off the top of my head, but there's so many people that in their discomfort, they found ways to move mountains.
Sure.
And to reach people and touch people and help people. And I mean, that's the goal. But at the very least, just realizing that pain and suffering are an inevitability. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And how do we move from that?
Yeah.
I want to circle back to one thing, though.
Yeah.
The accident on the 405 this morning. You know, hearing about this father and his young son just breaks my heart. This is happening all over the world.
Yeah.
I think it's really, really close to home here. And I think it's especially closer because it's something that affected so many people driving to their offices this morning.
Sure.
And it really just, it hits home harder than many other things that happen. There's a lot happening in the world right now. When I hear about a dad and his son involved in a fatal car accident, I drive with my kids on the freeway all the time.
Right.
Could have been me. And life is truly so precious.
Yeah.
The moments are so few. And once it's done, it's over.
Yeah.
You're done. And so my heart goes out to that father and son and the family. And I wonder how many lives just that simple story will touch that was directly affected by it. A lot of people were on their way to work and sat in that parking lot for an hour and a half like you.
Sure.
And again, there's stuff happening all over the world. That one really hits home.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of I think it's Tibetan monks. They actually pray for enough suffering to be able to be love in the world. And I'm like, man, it makes me feel like I'm on the opposite side of that mantra sometimes, of like trying to prevent any
suffering.
Yeah. And that's just a very restrictive approach most of the time. I mean, when you need to defend yourself or step in, there's times, but largely it's like, I think it's probably approaching life versus like avoiding life is good for mental and physical health.
Sure.
The warrior wins first and then goes to war, while the defeated warrior goes to war first and then seeks to win. Where do you go with that?
You're going to have to repeat that.
The warrior wins first and then goes to war, while the defeated warrior goes to war first and then seeks to win.
That's a good one. Basically, whether you think you can or you can't, You're right. Did I get that wrong?
No. I mean, you can go a million ways with this. I've interpreted it different ways, but one I think that has stuck is what are the potential first victories in the main buckets of life? I'll set the stage for you, and then I want you to kind of just riff on it. So that quote dovetails into, we've talked about this before, the Dartmouth professor, the midlife study. Essentially, between 40 and 47 is typically the lowest amount of happiness one will experience, but highest in meaning, which is interesting. He controls different factors, right? Race, gender, income, geographic location. So 40 to 47 is typically that dip in life happiness. And so one of my capstone research project was to take this study and kind of like provide a different angle. And instead of like talking about happiness or trying to aim for it or even achieve it, I kind of spun it as like, well, we're not going to avoid suffering. So how can we be as resilient as possible during this kind of valley? And so the 5 buckets were mindset, movement, nutrition, community, and recovery. And I kind of just fanned those out and researched each of those buckets. But that opening quote of like, win first and then go to war, it points towards a lot, like it feels like preparation, right? And in those 5 buckets, mindset, movement, nutrition, community, and recovery, I'm wondering if that even resonates with you. And if it does, like, what do first wins look like, let's say collectively, and then for you personally, perhaps?
Well, if you would have asked me what first wins meant 20 years ago, it would have been totally different, right? If you ask my younger self, what do you define as, or what do you think first wins are? It would have almost unequivocally resulted around more materialistic life accomplishments and or things.
Sure.
That's not what it is right now. I think there's an interesting correlation here because I think we spend the first 40 years winning.
Unpack that.
And then the next 40 years we go to war.
Yeah.
I mean, you got a bunch of young kids in here. I'm curious if you ask them, but like the first 40 years of research, isn't that one of your quotes? And then like life actually starts. But it also makes sense that 40 to 47 or whatever age you said is the greatest unhappiness. I think that's the transition into recognizing what have I been doing for the last 40 years. And I think fewer people than social media lets on are doing it the right way.
I want to put a pin in that because what you said, what have I been doing the last 40 years? That's a big question. If you honestly look at it, it can provide a lot of info and intel. Are you willing to share your answer to that question?
It's tough. It's really tough. Your first 15, 20 years of your life, like there's not much you can do but learn and react. Yeah. And sometimes we have really bad teachers. And so we react the best way we can. That's just in general. Yeah. And then kind of that move into adulthood, 20s and 30s, depending on who you're learning from, it's the Ferraris that are important and it's the money and you come to find out none of that stuff matters. Yeah. It doesn't. And it's this like perpetual keeping up with the Joneses, right? In your circle of friends, in your community. But I'll speak for myself. I was never asked between ages 12 and 18, how do you plan on impacting the world? Or what kind of a father do you think you want to be? Or, existential questions like this.
Yeah. In Judaism, the elders I've read, their main goal for their sons is for them to become a mensch, which means like just a decent citizen of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, man, I don't think I ever had anyone ask me that or even frame such a question up until I started reading seriously.
There are certain institutions like church and school that seek to, generally educate someone, and but it's just so much more than that. It's so much more than that. So the formative years are kind of like, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Who really actually knows? And then I think the real formative years, like 18 to 27, are largely wasted. I know they were absolutely in my life. Just chasing the wrong stuff, a lot of which I got, and realized I was very unhappy. It didn't build me up at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you're married and you're trying to start a family, and now it's about, you're basically racing to retire.
Yeah. It's just a different race.
And plan for that retirement. And then, you get to 45, 46, and you're like, what? Why am I so unhappy?
Yeah.
So that first 40, 45 years is winning, but not in the traditional sense. You're actually losing a lot.
Sure.
And you're learning, and the research is compiling, and, whether it's 40 or 45, whatever the age is, now you're ready for the real world. And then the clock is ticking. Yeah. I saw something this morning that said the average 40-year-old man has 37 years left in his life. Your life is 50% over.
It's halftime.
It's like halftime, and 50% of the first half, I was, for all intents and purposes, in a tailspin, just not really knowing what to do with the information, drinking out of a fire hose, doing the best I can to assess and analyze it. And so I think that's where the unhappiness comes from. But I think it turns quickly, because you said there's also the highest meaning.
Yeah.
Like, I may or may never be rich, but I know the love I pour into my children will have a direct response to how they view the world.
Yeah, that reminds me, I forget who says it, but it's like resume activities and eulogy activities.
We talked about this before.
Was it us? Yeah, I think we touched on it.
Maybe on the treadmill or something.
And it's, it might be a little cheesy, but like if you sink into that a little bit, it's like, man, there's a difference. And seasons come into play. There might be seasons where you're pushing hard professionally, and that's good. But if you, over the course of a life, I think it's when you start to think about, man, where am I investing the time and energy and perhaps money split between those two?
It's hard to tell someone watching, don't worry about money.
Sure.
It's hard to say that.
Sure.
Nonetheless, I'm going to say, don't worry about money. Yeah. Don't worry, period.
Yeah.
All the anecdotes are there. 98% of the stuff we worry about never actually happens.
Sure.
The majority of the stuff that we think about, no one else is thinking about. On the entire planet, billions of people, 98% of the things up here, no one's thinking about. From an anxiety perspective, from a worry perspective.
Yeah.
And so I think the lesson here really is take stock of what's important, what you think is going to be important, because no one's going to care about my resume when I'm dead. I'm not even going to care.
Yeah.
I think as I get towards those years, what people would say at my funeral is way more important.
Mm-hmm.
And if you reverse engineer that, was I always the most successful? No. Did I do everything I could, to give everyone every opportunity I could to better themselves? You know, this right here, I don't care if one guy sees it.
Yeah.
Who's like, wow, two guys, you know, both in their 40s, both rebuilding marriages, still growing businesses, too many plants in the garden.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay.
Yeah. I'm going to touch on these 5 buckets, give my perspective, and then pass it to you. So the first wins in these buckets to me, the first one's mindset. I kind of bifurcate this bucket. I think there's self-mastery and then there's craft mastery. I think, and this is a very general statement, but I think in the West, we generally over-index on craft mastery too early and too long at the cost of self-mastery.
100%.
And then we get to 40 or 50 and 60 and realize like, oh man.
We don't even know who we are.
Right.
We know what we're really good at, or maybe really good at.
Right. Maybe.
I just said it. I'm not really good at anything. Sometimes I feel like,
right.
Tell me that's okay.
And it's okay.
Okay. But I'm just now beginning to master my thoughts and my emotions.
Right.
And not even master. No, I take that back. Just beginning to be aware of them.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think mindset is huge in that regard.
Yeah.
And that everything we touch, every interaction we have is going to be a direct product of what we have going on up here.
Sure.
How we've challenged those thoughts, how we've challenged those attitudes and perceptions. And so mindset, I mean, you can't even start it. It's a non-starter without mindset.
Sure. And the first win, in regards to first wins, again, it sounds almost trite, but like, you know, practically it's like, you know, are you praying every day? Are you meditating every day? Are you getting still? Like very simple things, or just mental models or cognitive frameworks that you can get familiar with that help you on a day-to-day basis. Because over time, you practice those things. It's like a muscle, you know? You have more tools, you're able to kind of move, and you're more flexible and that stuff. So first wins in that regard are like daily mental practices. Next one's movement, pretty straightforward. I think first wins in that regard to me is like
just get out and move.
You gotta let's get more detailed. When you're young, I mean, you got so much time, so you can kind of just like spend 2.5 hours at 24 or LA Fitness. So I think like once you kind of start building a professional life and have family and all that good stuff, I think it's more like I need to treat this as an appointment or schedule it. And that sounds boring, and I know it's like another schedule, but it's not going to get done most of the time unless it's prioritized in that way. I think that's a first win in regards to movement.
There's a concept in Christian theology known as sanctification of time. And I think it speaks greatly to what you're trying to say right now, because time can be so mundane if not looked at as our biggest gift.
Sure.
So you have all this time, and what are you doing with it?
Yep.
I struggle with that because at the end of every day, when I catalog the day, man, I'm wasting so much time.
Sure.
And it's really, really interesting. I'm going to read you a quote. So there's this quote from the Screw Tape Letters. Have you ever heard of it?
Mm-hmm.
Screw Tape Letters was written by C.S. Lewis. Literary genius, atheist turned theologian. And this is what he says about time. You no longer need a good book, which he really likes, to keep him from his prayers or his work or his sleep. A column of advertisements in yesterday's paper will do. You can make him waste his time not only in conversation he enjoys with people whom he likes, but also in conversation with those he cares nothing about, on subjects that bore him. You can make him do nothing at all for long periods. You can keep him up late at night, not roistering, but staring at a dead fire in a cold room. All the healthy and outgoing activities which we want him to avoid can be inhibited, and nothing given in return, so that at last he may say, I now see that I spent most of my life doing neither what I ought nor what I liked. I spent most of my life doing neither what I ought nor what I liked.
That's hauntingly beautiful.
I read that and I'm like, so as it relates to what you're saying about time, I perceive each of these buckets as what would I tell my younger self or any younger self watching this.
Sure.
So with mindset, it's like, forget about getting good at something, get good at yourself. Get really good at yourself. Get strategic, surgical about yourself. And yourself is a subset of obviously the mind and the body, but the soul as well.
Yep.
But the battlefield is all up here. It all starts with the mind and learning to understand emotions and thoughts, and where emotions come from and where thoughts come from and how they're very, very much linked. As it relates to movement, as a very practical matter, if you don't have it blocked out, you're not going to do it. The whole day could come and go. And I've spent years like this in an office with a gym bag packed, ready to go.
Right.
And have done nothing.
Yep.
So I think time relates to all of these. And that quote is very poignant for a lot of other reasons, but I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, for sure. Next one's nutrition. First win for me here is nail down your protein. I mean, there's overwhelming research now that,
Oh, you're just getting really practical.
this is
This is like,
this
is not even abstract.
no, this is just like,
It's like, do this thing.
yeah, regardless of, dietary lifestyle preferences, right? Vegan, carnivore, whatever, like there's too much research to ignore the importance of protein. Anywhere from 0.8 to 1 gram is usually what you'll find. Probably do plus or minus either way. But just making sure you get that in at each meal. Especially as you age, you start to see some of the muscle loss and what that does to metabolism, joint health, ligaments, all that. And even cognitively, if it gets displaced. So if you're not hitting protein numbers, it's probably getting displaced with other things, which wreaks havoc on your muscle and cognitive ability. So for me, first win is like understanding why it's important and then implementing strategies to hit that daily. What do you think?
I don't have much to say about that because it's so, again, it's not really abstract. It's very simple and practical. And, you're a former bodybuilder. And so you went one spectrum to the other. You're all about the body. Now you're all about the mind.
Yeah. Trying to bring them both together in some way.
Sure. Yeah. No comment. Next.
Community. This can go a million ways. I think a first win in my POV is find a group or a person you can be close with. Very vague, but I think that's an entry point.
It's so important. We talk about loneliness a lot. Loneliness is a complicated condition, and there's a lot of things involved with it. But one main thing is lack of community. I mean, that's a glaring one. But that's not the only thing, because you could be surrounded by people in a community and still be very lonely.
That's been my challenge historically.
I hear you loud and clear. But community is, for guys, it's tough. I mean, that's how all this started.
Yeah.
Right? All of this was just a community of one. Just one person who was going through almost the identical circumstances, personally and professionally, at basically the same time.
Same age.
And there's millions.
Yeah.
I don't want to say thousands. There's like millions of guys. And so a great place is, online social media to really lock into stuff like this that's just trying to feed a person and say, hey, it's okay. You're going to get through this. That's a type of community.
Yep.
But hopefully this allows other guys to be a little bit more vulnerable with the things that they're going through so that they can help build each other up. And it's tough because men are really guarded, generally. And the community they need is not necessarily the community they have.
Sure. One thing I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good.
I think this is very related to what you're saying is I think men need something different in a therapeutic environment than what women need.
Yes.
I think men need to feel like needed and powerful, and women need to feel safe and loved.
And I'll even push back a little bit on that because I think there's a lot of that men also need.
Absolutely.
But
as
yes,
priorities, I think.
I think generally you're right.
And so that's interesting, right? Like, because when men feel like strong and powerful, their whole state changes.
Sure.
And I think you can do that in a intellectual and conversational setting. I think that's amplified when it's paired in conjunction with or in parallel to something physical. And that can be anything. Working on cars, lifting weights, martial arts, building something, like doing
it's the
something.
touch effect.
It's like I'm in my body doing something, whether it's like on my own or I'm with a dude or a group of guys, in conjunction with the intellectual side and the traditional, like, I guess, talk therapy or just conversation side. It's
creative collaboration. You're doing something.
Right.
You're creating something.
Yeah.
And that could be a connection. It could be a similarity.
Sure.
Which is very important.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So a first win in community bucket, I think it starts with intent. I think you kind of have to like have intent of like, I'm going to find something, a person or a group to be close with.
I'm going to say it starts before that. I think I don't know how much is said about community. I know growing up, generally, we had a church community, and that might not be sufficient.
Sure.
Right. I think it's recognizing in this thing, in this life, I need community.
Sure.
I need people, men, better than me. And I say that carefully, but with more experience or similar experiences to bounce things off of, to validate, to also hold me accountable.
Sure.
Right? Just in the instant example, when these worlds of ours collided, there was a lot of validation, but I think there was a fair amount of accountability as well.
Sure.
Because community with no accountability, I'm sure it's useful and good. I can hang out with a few dudes and just have a bunch of beers. Then what?
Yeah. In the health and fitness world, by the way, it's a booming industry. Like the numbers behind health and fitness today with regards to how much people spend.
Oh, yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Sure.
But most of that stuff is, what's the word I'm looking for? Is it optional?
Supplemental.
Like you can add that, but take it away, it's probably still be fine. But you can't not sleep. You have to sleep. It's a non-negotiable, right? And so I think we treat it as like something I'll just kind of let happen. But our lifestyles today, whether it's like burnout, overwork, screen times, sleep hygiene in general, it's so like effed that it's a downline of like disastrous health outcomes from, cognitive abilities, testosterone, divergent thinking, all that stuff. And so, when I used to do like online coaching and all that stuff, people ask me all these questions like, what do I do this? Do I do that? I'm like, honestly, let's just dial your sleep in for the first month. Like isolate that factor and then let's see how you feel, how you perform.
So important. You don't have sleep apnea. I use a CPAP and it's life-changing, but it's annoying. But at the same time, something as simple as like you're not getting restful sleep. Your body is not doing everything it needs to during rest. That has an effect on the mind, on the body, all of it. Right. Yeah, no, recovery is very much, and mental recovery, right? Like no screen time. Yeah. Like going on a screen fast for 2 or 3 days. I've been doing that a lot. Maybe not 3 days, maybe not even 2, but just 8 hours, no screen.
Right. Speaking of that,
first you get withdrawals, right?
You're like reaching for it.
You're just reaching for, and then you're like, oh, this is pretty liberating.
Yeah. I'm experiencing that firsthand with our kids. So we cut screen time the whole week. No screens at all. We used to do like nighttime, like let's watch a movie, whatever.
They've probably been more better behaved than ever.
I mean, this is going to sound very like ridiculous, but it feels like we're a family.
It doesn't sound ridiculous at all.
The first 2 days was like, okay, what do we do? Like we settled into like, hey, let's have dinner. Let's read a book. Let's play a game. it feels like a little house on the prairie sometimes. But like, it feels so good.
That's so amazing. And you know, that's something my wife started several months ago. She just wanted to have dinner every night at the same time. It was difficult to get out of work and get it done, but with no screen time as the rule, the amount of connection, exponential.
That's why.
Because you're just hearing them talk and you're speaking to them and there's no distraction.
Right.
The phone is a walking distraction. It's ready to rip you apart from that thing that we just said earlier, so limited and so precious.
Sure.
Time.
Yeah. Love that. 5 buckets, first wins. Thank you, man.